Good evening and happy Monday to those of you who spend your Sundays rooting for the New York Jets. This is episode 2 of WTF is Up with the Jets. We're talking all wide receiver today. We're going to use a formula to decide which wide receiver is most likely to be selected by the New York Jets in the first round of the 2022 NFL Draft. We're also going to discuss a wide receiver who is already on our roster that Jets fans have some pretty divided opinions about. But first, there are 3 first-round wide receiver prospects that all have one big question that we need to answer together in order to determine if they are worthy of the number 10 overall selection by the Jets. Let's get right into it. Let's start with a guy who has been screaming up draft boards. That's Jameson Williams, wide receiver, Alabama. I think he has the highest upside in the draft. The measurables, the pedigree, the production, the eye test, all an A+. But we know what the question is. The question is the ACL. Tore it last game of the year. Now, I'm a little bit more concerned about the ACL tear than most Jets fans who are excited about the prospect of Jameson Williams being a Jet. But the prognosis looks good. He is already moving with full range of motion, a couple months post-surgery, with some reports saying that he may not miss any time at all. And it is a 5-year investment. And Jameson Williams, man, he's got that Tyreek Hill effect. And if you watch basketball, it's like the Steph Curry effect, right? When Steph Curry takes one dribble across half court and he's already in his range, when he is screaming up and down the baseline, running off screens, when you have to respect the ball in his hands 38 feet from the basket, that puts so much pressure on a defense and opens things up for teammates in ways that even the most advanced analytics cannot quantify. Same thing with Jameson Williams. His mere presence on the field, you're going to have to roll a safety that way. No one's running with Jameson. And when you use him in motion, just like Tyreek Hill, right? When they're in man coverage and right before the snap, he sprints from the right hash across the formation, and you see the defense is communicating and the corner's trying to run by his own linebackers to keep up with him. Speed creates pressure. Pressure breaks pipes. So I'm for it. But the big question is, will he be ready? When will he be ready? Now, again, you say a first round pick. This is a 4 or 5 year investment. So who cares if he misses the first 4-6 weeks? Well, front offices and coaching staffs don't always have the luxury to think the way that fans do. You know, you often assume like, oh, fans, that fanatic, impulsive, short-term thinking. But oftentimes, fans have the luxury of thinking more down the line than coaches and GMs do. Because I'm going to be a New York Jets fan for the rest of my life. I know that. You know that. Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas do not know that they are going to be employed by the New York Jets past this year. So let's think about how this might go. Say the Jets select Jameson Williams, right? And it's a little slower than we thought, and he's not available the first 2 months of the year. And then there's an injury at wide receiver. And then Zach Wilson, in his second year, is again throwing to the likes of DJ Montgomery or Jeff Smith as one of his primary outside receiver targets. We'll talk about Mims later, but we can't count on him. He was on the roster last year, and Zach Wilson, towards the end of the year, primary outside receiving targets, the likes of Keelan Cole, DJ Montgomery, Jeff Smith, Tariq Black in Buffalo. So optics matter for front offices. Winning matters most, but optics do matter. So if the Jets went out and spent all this money in free agency, and they had historic draft capital, and if they start the season with Zach Wilson throwing to some borderline rosterable wide receivers the same way they ended it, that's bad optics. That's bad optics. So am I willing to be patient for Jameson? Yeah. Could he be that like mid-season addition that Odell Beckham was, just comes in and dominates? Yeah. But it is something to consider. So what's your answer to that question? Is the injury risk worth it? Say he misses the first 2 months. Is that worth it? Put it in the comments below. What do you think? That's the big question for Jameson Williams as the 10th overall pick. Now, let's move into a guy who has created some really polar opinions, not only amongst Jets fans, but amongst football fans in general. That is Drake London, wide receiver, USC. Now, the big knock on him, the big question is, can he separate? Can he separate? Well, I'm not Joe Blewett. I haven't logged the number, dozens and dozens of hours of Drake London tape. I watched 3 or 4 USC games last year, and I hopped on YouTube for about a half an hour before this. So add to the conversation below if I miss anything here on Drake London. And I gotta say, people who say he can't separate, there's some truth to that. There is. A lot of his catches come on contested balls, where the defensive back is really close to him, but he uses his strength, his height, his jumping ability, his balance, and his hand-eye coordination to win. Now, it was good enough for 136 receiving yards a game. So my question right back at you is, people say, oh, that's not going to translate because wide receivers or defensive backs rather in the NFL are going to be bigger and stronger. So he's not going to be able to bully defensive backs in the NFL. Well, you can apply that same logic to the skill sets of any wide receiver prospect. Jameson Williams wins with speed. Defensive backs in the NFL are going to be faster. Garrett Wilson wins with elusiveness. Defensive backs in the NFL are going to be surer tacklers. Chris Olave wins with route running. Defensive backs in the NFL are going to have better coverage technique. So why is it only Drake London's skill set that's not going to translate? That's my question back to you. And people bring up, there's been this stat going around comparing Drake London and his contested catch rate to other wide receivers recently who have come out of college with a similar contested catch rate. Denzel Mims and JJ Arcega-Whiteside were on that list. But this is not an apples to apples comparison. I just told you Drake London averaged 136 receiving yards a game last season at USC. JJ Arcega-Whiteside, his last year of college, 88 yards a game. Denzel Mims, his last year at Baylor, 78 yards a game. And they were both over a year older than Drake London when they did that. So one of those things is not like the other. Drake London is built different than JJ Arcega-Whiteside and Denzel Mims. That's not to say he's the best prospect. That's not to say he's going to be successful. But that argument just doesn't hold up for me. So you might say we don't have a lot of examples of guys who win with catch radius and jump balls and 50-50 balls. That is true. The game is going towards a separation ability and yards after catch via speed and elusiveness. That is true, which is why I like Garrett Wilson better than Drake London. But, I mean, we did have Brandon Marshall, who won with good route running, playing strong at the top of the route, and being bigger and stronger than defensive backs. We've seen Mike Evans do it. Mike Evans is probably a little bit faster than Drake London. We've seen Mike Williams do it. We've seen Alshon Jeffrey do it. So why not Drake London? That's my question right back to you. Why do we think that his skill set is the only skill set that won't translate? So if you have an answer, if there's some statistics that I'm missing, or you've watched more USC than I have, put it in the comments below. Open it up to a conversation. There's one more wide receiver prospect that has a big question we have to answer in order to determine if they are worthy of the number 10 overall pick. This was my first certified draft crush this offseason. That is wide receiver Treylon Burks, Arkansas. Here's the big question. Can he run the full route tree? That's the big question. Because he wasn't asked to do it at Arkansas. Now, that doesn't mean he can't do it. because they used him as like, we're going to get you the ball and you just go. You make plays. So if I had to grade his route running, it would almost be an incomplete. Now, I listened to an interview of former Jets GM Mike Tannenbaum. And before you click off the video, yes, he wasn't the best GM, but the guy does know a thing or two about football. And he said something that was really simple, but I found it to be really profound. He said, when you're drafting in the first round, draft good players from good schools and ask them to do exactly what you saw them do on tape. Treylon Burks is a good player. Treylon Burks comes from a good school, SEC competition. But he was not asked to run an NFL route tree at Arkansas. So now, if he isn't a polished route runner, and you're thinking about taking him at the number 10 overall pick, we have to ask ourselves, here's the big question, is Treylon Burks a unicorn? Does he have one elite skill set? Something he does better than anybody else that can make up for that? Now, why do we have to ask that question? Well, go ahead, write down, take a pen and paper, write down off the top of your head the 15 best wide receivers in the NFL. In any order, write them down. And what you'll come up with is 11 elite route runners and 4 unicorns. You'll start with great route runners: Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs. Maybe guys like Keenan Allen to round out the bottom of your 15. But then also in there will be 4 guys who aren't necessarily elite route runners, but they have a unicorn trait. That is Tyreek Hill, the fastest human being I've ever seen with the football in his hands. That's Deebo Samuel, who is your number 1 wide receiver and your number 2 running back. That's Mike Evans, the biggest catch radius in the NFL, 6'5" and change, long arms, strong. And the 4th unicorn is DK Metcalf, who is built like Mr. Olympia and runs a 4.3 40. So if he's not an elite route runner, the evidence tells us he has to be a unicorn in order to become a top 15 receiver in the NFL. And I think it's reasonable that if you're taking a player, number 10 overall in the draft, you expect them to develop into one of the top 15 players at their position. So put your answer below. Is Treylon Burks a unicorn, and what is his unicorn ability? I think he might be. I think his playmaking and his yards after catch ability, how strong he plays at the catch point, I think he's a unicorn. I'm interested to hear your answer to that question. All right. Now that we got those big questions out of the way, if you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. Your feedback is appreciated. And if you've been hanging around this long, maybe even consider hitting subscribe. I'll be giving away this hat, well, actually that one right there, to a random subscriber on draft night. I appreciate your support. Now, we're going to use a formula to decide which wide receiver is most likely to be selected by the New York Jets if they do go wide receiver with the number 10 overall pick. Now, this does not mean they are the best prospect. This means who is most likely to be selected. So, Joe Douglas is going to be our professor. So we are going to harness the mindset of Professor Joe Douglas. There are 4 grades that we're going to give these players, and that's going to equal their GPA. Whoever has the highest GPA is most likely to be selected by the Jets. The 4 grades are going to be, number 1, the likelihood of them being available at 10. That's pretty important. If you're selected already off the board, you're not going to be a Jet, right? Number 2 is how athletic they are. Because Joe Douglas, if you look at his drafting trends, within the first 3 rounds of the draft, he only takes elite athletes. That RAS score, the relative athletic score, seems to be an important metric to Joe Douglas. Even guys in the 3rd round like Zuniga or Ashton Davis who haven't panned out, really high athletic scores. Denzel Mims, really high athletic score. AVT, really high athletic score. Elijah Moore is actually like the lowest top 3 pick in terms of athletic score that Joe Douglas has taken, and he's a pretty darn good athlete, so that should tell you something right there. So that's important. Health, or availability, and athleticism. The next one is health. What is your current injury status? Because we're making a big investment with the number 10 overall pick, we want to make sure that you are available. Availability is your best ability. And finally, your system fit. How would you fit in a Michael LaFleur offense, quarterbacked by Zach Wilson, and how would you complement the pieces that we already have in place on offense? Availability, athleticism, health, and system fit. That's going to give them their overall grade. There are 5 wide receivers we're going to grade. That is Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, Drake London, Treylon Burks, and Chris Olave. Let's see who is the most likely pick at 10 for the Jets if they go wide receiver. Starting with Garrett Wilson. We're going to start with his availability grade. What is the likelihood that he is still on the board when the Jets are picking at 10? I'm going to give him a B- because I think there's a really decent chance that Atlanta pulls a trigger at 8. They could go London. They have needs all over their roster, but the Atlanta Falcons wide receiver room may be the most anemic position group out of all the teams and all the positions in the NFL. So I'm going to give him a B- there. And then maybe even a little bit of a curve because I'm hoping he falls to 10. Now, his athleticism. I'm going to give him an A-. Short area quickness is elite. A sub 4.40. Eye test, a check. Only reason it's not an A+ is that he is 6 feet tall, 190 pounds. So yeah, I wish he was 6'2", 210, but excellent athlete. That's an A-. System fit, A+. Home run in this system. The elusiveness, the yak ability, the route running, perfect system fit. So Garrett Wilson's grades, a B- for his likelihood to be available, an A- for his athleticism, and an A+ for his system fit. Now, his health, that's an A. Very durable player. Had one time where he missed a game because of concussion-like symptoms, but no chronic injury problems at all. Health is an A. This rounds out Garrett Wilson to have a 3.7 GPA, and we'll compare that to the other 4 wide receivers to see which one is most likely to go to the Jets. Let's jump into Jameson Williams, Alabama. Starting with the availability. What is the likelihood he's there at 10? Slightly higher than Garrett. I'm going to give him a B+, and this is again only because the injury, which we'll touch on in a little bit. For a while there, he was mocked in the 20s and then to the teens, and he keeps rising up draft boards, but I still think it's likely that Garrett Wilson is the first wide receiver off the board. Now, athleticism, A. Electric speed. I cannot unsee him leaving 15 yards of separation between him and the nearest defensive back by the time he reaches the end zone. I can't unsee it. Now, why isn't it an A+? I'd like him to gain 10 pounds. 6'2", $185, $190. I'd like him to throw on 10 pounds, but A athlete for sure. System fit, another A+. Gives us the home run threat we need to complement our shifty Elijah Moore and our possession receiver, Corey Davis. Also has excellent yak ability too, because of his speed. Now the health. This is going to knock down his GPA quite a bit. I'm going to give him a C. Now you might say he's got a torn ACL. That has to be a D or an F. But again, we already touched on how the prognosis looks good. There are some reports that he may not miss any games at all if there's no other setbacks. And if you look at NFL trends, NFL executives are becoming more and more confident with players' ability to produce post-ACL tear. Cooper Kupp tore his ACL a couple years ago and had a Jerry Rice-like season last year. Chris Godwin and Michael Gallup got the bag after tearing their ACL. So the confidence in the surgery and the rehab is trending high. So I'm going to follow that trend, and I'm going to give him a passing grade of C. So that rounds out Jameson Williams' GPA to be 3.4. He was right with or above Garrett Wilson with everything else, but the health knocks him down to a 3.4. Let's go to Drake London, USC. What's the likelihood he's available at 10? I'm going to give this a B+. I think that he or Garrett Wilson and Jameson Williams, any of those three could potentially be the first wide receiver taken. I still think it's most likely that it's Garrett Wilson, and a team could go with the upside of a Jameson Williams over him as well. So Atlanta could take him at 8, but I think it's more likely that he's there at 10 than Garrett Wilson is. So we're going to give him a B+ for that. Now, the athleticism, B+. Now I know the pro day wasn't very encouraging. He didn't look 100%. He didn't run the 40. And if he did, we're talking probably mid to high 4.5s. But within that athletic metric, we do have to consider the size of the athlete. And being 6'4", being 220, being a contested catch and yards after catch machine, he's built different than any wide receiver in this class. So no, he's not the caliber of athlete that Garrett Wilson or Jameson Williams is, but the way he moves, carrying that kind of frame, is good enough for a B+. System fit, I'm going to give him an A-. I know that separation and yak ability are huge, but he gets his yak. He gets his yak differently, but he still gets his yak. And the other reason why it's an A- is that we don't have a wide receiver target like this on our offense. Corey Davis is a possession receiver, and then we have a bunch of short, quick, shifty slot guys. Being that Denzel Mims, we don't really know what he's going to be. So giving Zach Wilson this security blanket, this sort of almost like a tight end in the slot, I think would complement the players we have on our roster really well. So he gets an A- for that. And the health, C+. The ankle, a broken ankle to me is just as, if not more concerning than the torn ACL. Because with these big guys like basketball players, once they start injuring their feet, they're done. And Drake London's built like a basketball player, 6'4", 220. And then he had to push the pro day back because he tweaked his hamstring, so that concerns me. Now, his health is a little bit higher of a grade than Jameson Williams because that injury took place a few months before. So he should be ready for training camp, but that does concern me, and that does dip his GPA quite a bit to 3.3. So far, Garrett Wilson is the most likely at 3.7. Jameson Williams has a 3.4, and Drake London has a 3.3. There's two more wide receivers we need to get to. Next, my draft crush. Treylon Burks. Man, I keep coming back to him. You know, I started off loving Treylon Burks, then I want to meet some Garrett Wilson, maybe Jameson if he's healthy, Drake London just to piss off other Jets fans on Twitter. But man, Treylon, the eye test for me. But let's get into the grades. We have to be fair. All right. Availability. How likely is it that Treylon is available at number 10? A+. I really can't see Treylon Burks going in the first 9 picks. I don't think I've seen one mock draft that has that happening in the past month. So that's an A+. That's good news for us. Now, athleticism. B+. I know. The raw athletic score and the numbers from the combine would tell you this should be like a C or maybe even a D. And those numbers matter. Analytics matter, but so do manalytics, and so do the eye test. And just like Jameson Williams burning Miami and leaving the defender 20 yards in the dust, I can't unsee Treylon Burks playing this small school called Alabama and being the best athlete on the field to the tune of 8 catches, 179 yards, 2 touchdowns, including a 60-yard touchdown where that speed looked good. He looks faster with the ball in his hands than the 4.5540 would suggest. So the numbers say C. The eye test says like A+. So he's going to get a B+ for athleticism. System fit. A-. He's not the home run system fit that Garrett Wilson or Jameson Williams is because his route running isn't as good and his separation isn't as good. But the yak ability here and how strong he plays at the top of the route would add a really solid dimension to this Jets offense. And also you can get the ball in his hands in a lot of different ways. And we saw Mike LaFleur is willing to do that. Whether it was with Elijah Moore or Braxton Berrios, if you have playmaking ability, he's going to get you a jet sweep. He's going to get you a reverse, a screen. He's going to get the balls into the hands of his playmakers. System fit, A-. Finally, for Treylon Burks, the health, A. Had a couple nagging chest shoulder injuries, nothing serious, no surgeries, no concussion concerns. The health is a check. So Treylon Burks is a very well-rounded scorer, and that brings him up to a 3.75 GPA, which just nudges him over Garrett Wilson. The big difference between the two is that he's much more likely to be available. So Garrett Wilson, slightly better prospect. Treylon Burks, much more likely he's there. He takes the lead. Now, one final wide receiver prospect to get to. That is Garrett Wilson's teammate from Ohio State, Chris Olave, who has been mocked all over the place. Let's see what the grading system says. First, availability, another A+. He seems to be being mocked kind of where Treylon is, where he could go anywhere from like the mid-teens or even fall down to like Green Bay or Buffalo in the mid-20s. And just like Treylon Burks, I have not seen a mock draft recently that has Chris Olave touching the top 10. So he's going to be there. Now, athleticism, B+. A sub 4.40, moves super silky. Nothing really blows you away about him athletically. So that's why he gets a B+. Now, also a slight frame. I think his play strength is probably the thing he has to develop the most compared to other receivers on this list. But he just moves differently than any of these other guys. Some players in a lot of sports, they just make it look artistic, right? Kobe Bryant can do a step back fadeaway and brick it off the back of the rim, and it just looked beautiful. Ken Griffey Jr. could ground out to second, and it would just look like a work of art. Chris Olave's route running is something to artistically behold. It really is. So he gets a B+, but I like him to gain 10 pounds of muscle. System fit, another A-. Really good route runner. It can separate his release. If you're going to jam him, you better hit him, because if not, he's gone. Reminds me of Calvin Ridley in that way. So a guy I think who may not be your prototypical number one wide receiver when you think number one in your head, but could give you number one wide receiver production in the right system with the right quarterback. Good system fit. Health, A-. He did miss 5 games as a junior, but played the whole season last year and has no chronic health concerns. That rounds him out to a GPA of 3.75, just below or tied with his teammate and just below Treylon Burks. So if we look at ranking them in order of who is most likely to be a New York Jet, the highest GPA belongs to Treylon Burks, Arkansas, 3.75. Then the two Ohio State teammates, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, are tied at 3.7. And then the two guys whose injuries knocked them down, Jameson Williams, 3.4, although he might have the highest overall upside. And then Drake London, 3.3. So that's who I think might be the best chance to be a Jet at wide receiver. Treylon Burks, by the numbers, with the two Ohio State guys right behind him. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is Treylon Burks worthy of the number 10 overall pick in the NFL draft? What other metrics should I have added to this chart besides availability, health, athleticism, and system fit? What else is missing? Add it to the conversation below. And hit subscribe if you haven't already. To close out, let's talk about a wide receiver who's already on the roster that Jets fans, or at least Jets Twitter, seems to be pretty divided on. Because we've seen some of these videos of Denzel Mims working out. He looks pretty swole. He looks good. And some Jets fans are saying this is a revenge tour. He's going to be great. He's going to be our wide receiver 1. And then you have the opposite who are like, we should just cut this bum. And of course, the truth usually lies somewhere in the middle. Now, before we talk about our options with Denzel Mims of what we should do, I think it's worth mentioning that there has to be something going on with Denzel Mims that we didn't know last year. Because For me, just like 2 plus 2 was not equaling 4 with Denzel Mims last year. The two knocks of why he wasn't getting the playing time was there was questions about like his work ethic. Is he in shape? Well, I don't know. The dude got like really bad food poisoning and then COVID back to back. So that might not be his fault, but maybe it took him a while to get into game shape. And he's always looked like a dude who's been really lean, really strong, and, no like weight concern. So he looked in shape. And the other thing was he couldn't learn the playbook. You have to learn all three positions at wide receiver to play in this offense. And it's like, okay, those are fair things, but are you really telling me that guys like DJ Montgomery and Jeff Smith, or even Tariq Black in Buffalo, coming up off the practice squad for Tariq Black, Jeff Smith, a special teamer, DJ Montgomery wasn't even with the team in the beginning of the year, where those guys were able to pick up the system faster than Denzel Mims, gave us a better chance of winning than Denzel Mims, or in better shape than Denzel Mims. It's not adding up to me. I think there was something else that had him in a little bit of the doghouse. But of course, Saleh and JD are keeping that tight to the vest, and good for them. So I'm hopeful for Denzel Mims. What are our options? We have 3 options with Denzel Mims. A, we can cut him and get nothing with minimal cap relief. That's dumb. That's pointless. We're not going to do that. B, we trade him, and this would be trading an asset at its lowest possible value. And listener, I got a C in economics as a freshman. But even I know that you want to sell, or you want to buy low and sell high, not the other way around. So it doesn't make sense. I mean, what are you going to get from a 6th round pick? Well, I guess if Blake Cashman's a 6th rounder, then on the Joe Douglas scale, Denzel Mims, okay, maybe a 5th rounder. But to me, for his upside, it's not worth trying to cash him in for a 5th or 6th round pick. So what do? We do option C, which is the most common sense thing to do, which is bring him into camp, see what he's got, hope for the best, but we cannot pencil him in for any specific role on this offense. We have to head into this draft expecting that Denzel Mims is no higher than 5 on our wide receiver chart. We just can't bank on it. So anything that he gives us, to me, is like a bonus. And I think all likelihood he ends up probably being like our number 4, 5 receiver, contributes. Is he ever going to be the number 2 or number 1 that we hoped? Maybe not. But is he going to be like a complete bust out of the league in a year? No, I think somewhere in the middle. So I'm here for the Denzel Mims comeback year. All signs point to him working really hard, getting in good shape, building up some chemistry with quarterback Zach Wilson. But we can't bank on it. All right, that's it for me. Episode 2 of WTF is up with the New York Jets. Like this video if you enjoy this long form type of content. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. Maybe even consider hitting subscribe. But either way, let's go Jets.